Welcome back, everyone, to the Panda School of Chess YouTube channel. You are watching the sixth episode of the Main Line Theory Speedrun. Now, as you can see, we are starting off strong today with an opponent resigning after two moves for some reason. That is likely going to be the most difficult win in the whole series unless I end up facing a Grandmaster somewhere down the line. Now, I do remember that the Ruy Lopez theory video on the Berlin defense needs to be uploaded. That, however, is still a work in progress. So I thought that while that is happening, I might as well play the fourth game of the speedrun today. Well, the fourth game, I suppose, is just over. The fifth game of the speedrun today. So I can keep the episodic content coming, I suppose. I will briefly mention here before we begin with today's video that I now have my own chess coaching academy and high quality online lessons are now available to you. So, more on this at the end of the video. I will now seek a game online and let's see what we get today. Well, hopefully, it doesn't take too long to find a game. All right, so we have a game here against Giorgio Casanova, rated 819. Let's start with the move 1e4, and let me quickly update the player name and the rating on the overlay here. All right, I'm back after making the changes. Let's play knight f3. That did take up 30 seconds of our time, but I don't think that will really matter. And the thumbnail is going to be very interesting today because my opponent is actually from Switzerland. So that's always fun. Yeah, let's see how my opponent responds to knight to f3. We've already faced knight c6 and we've played the Ruy Lopez, which is what I'll be sticking throughout the series. And there we face the Berlin defense. So hopefully we see something different in this game because I don't necessarily want to keep repeating myself. I suppose I'll just cut to the point where my opponent wants to make a move here because apparently they don't want to play the opening. Okay, and just as I say that, they have played the move knight to c6. So let's go bishop b5. The main line here is a6. I have been talking about that in the last video as well. There are other moves, of course. d6 is very popular at these lower levels. It is very likely that we see the move pawn to d6. It is not a very good move. It's called the Steinerd's defense. Okay, knight to d4 is a very interesting move. So knight d4 is what is called the bird's defense. Well, against the bird's defense, there are several ways of playing the opening. For one, it is not a very highly theoretical opening, so the main line is just to take the knight. You don't want to take the pawn, of course, because the bishop on b5 will hang. And now the way you continue in this position is just a castle. And what I'm going to try to do, well, they play the move pawn to c6. Now, where should we put the bishop? It is possible to put the bishop on c4, but that kind of runs into the move pawn to d5, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, we can take, and then go bishop b5 check, or we can immediately drop back to e2 as well. Now, at this beginner stage of the series, let us say I don't know any theory. I see that bishop c4 is running into d5, takes, the bishop is attacked. Don't really want to deal with it. So what I'm going to do here is actually just drop the bishop all the way back to e2. So while this is not the most critical way of playing the position, this is very likely to cause some serious consternation. Well, I can also just play the move bishop to f3. Don't really think that is what I want to do. I can also play c3. C3 if takes, then the knight comes out and protects the pawn. If c3, you should think of what happens after this move. Queen takes d4, right? Queen takes e4, I mean. Well, first thing I notice is that the rook can be aligned with the queen and the king here. So maybe I should start with the move rook e1. So you know what? I'm going to set the trap here. I'm going to play the move rook e1. And if queen takes e4 happens and bishop f3, oh my goodness, that's, well, a start to the series, I suppose. I'll not pre-move anything. So this is going to be a very short video if this is how it is going to go. Queen takes e1 as force. The queen is now just trapped. Yeah, we take. And now we are just completely winning already. All right. So now is the time where we should absolutely not let off on the gas, right? So we should make sure that we quickly and efficiently convert this into a win. The first step I think is to just attack the pawn. Let's go queen e4. Let's attack the pawn. Knight f6. We just take the pawn. C5 is, well, if my opponent wants to play c5, then well, they can be my guest, I suppose. I'll play the move d3 there. D3 and then c3, I suppose. D3 in particular because I can meet knight f6 with the developing move bishop to g5 there, pinning the knight to the king. That I think is a very efficient way to play the position. Let's play the move d3. Yeah, I'm just going to stick to general opening principles. Let's play bishop g5. There is no need to remove the queen from the central e4 square here because the knight is now pinned to the king. And the king really has only the c7 square to go to. Okay, now remember, the knight is no longer pinned to the king. So if you either need to move the queen or take the knight. Now we are up a lot of material, clearly. So I'm just going to go into the position where I trade pieces because that is good. When you're up material, you do want to be trading pieces. And the next move is, of course, going to be another developing move. Knight bd2, bring the rook over here. Well, we need to defend in this position. Where do we put the queen? We can put the queen here on the d5 square that also attacks the square. Notice that the rook does not have any infiltration squares because the bishop does actually cover e2. So let's go queen d5. They can't play a move like b6 to develop the bishop because that just hangs everything. Um, I can also play just king f1 and rook e1. Start trading even more pieces. They're likely going to fret about the pawn at this point because there is. It's actually a pretty inconvenient to pawn to have to defend. And then there is knight c4. Okay, they just give up the pawn. I can play queen takes f7, which I likely should do. Should I do it though? It's an interesting question. If I play queen takes f7, bishop e6, queen takes b7 is exit point. But I also can do it in the other way. I can just let them play the move. Well, there's also queen takes d6, but I just want to see if queen takes b7 leads to something better once they develop the bishop, right? So I don't necessarily want to. But then I suppose this is the most principled way, right? Yeah, let's just take on the d6 square. So the king doesn't have anywhere to go. This is the only move. And then I can like continue to step on the gas pedal here. Like knight c4. Bishop g4 is also a possibility. I think bishop g4 is a very clean way to do this. Knight e4, knight takes c5 is also very good. Actually, you know what? Let's bishop to g5 induces the move rook to e7, does it not? Yeah, let's actually, because of that, start with the move knight to e4 because knight c5, bishop g4 is, I think, something that is far more difficult to play against. There is this move, I just realized, but I guess I can just come back with the queen. I should have been a little bit more careful with that. Not allowing, yeah, my opponent finds it as well. Well, now I can take here if I want to. I can also just come to the d5 square. Do I really want to take? I don't want to take on the c5 square in this position. Actually, let's go to the d5 square. Because if I do take, then they have rook c8, then they will come in with the rook. I don't want to play in that way early on in the series. If I take on the c5 square, I want to do it with the knight, so there is immediate pressure here. So just making practical decisions here in the early stages of this game. I suppose we are out of the opening now. I mean, we are up a lot of material, so there is no need to overdo things here. Bishop g4 is strong, knight takes c5 is strong. Knight takes c5 just wins a pawn, so that is what I'm going to do first. Rook e7 I think is just 4. Okay, that just blunders checkmate. All right, 835 now. That was only 8 minutes long, so and there is not much theory to speak of in that. We will quickly analyze this game and probably play another game in the video. Be right back with the analysis board. Alright guys, so as usual, let's go back all the way to the start of the game and let's take a look at the opening. So e4, e5 and the Ruy Lopez and we faced knight d4. So this was first played, or well, I shouldn't say it was first played, but it was first popularized by this English grandmaster named Henry Bird. So this is now known as the Bird's defense against the Ruy Lopez. I would say that it is not completely unsound. It is playable, but white is just positionally better in most variations. If white knows what they're doing, so let's see what you can do against the several variations here. I'm not going to go too deep into this. I'm going to keep this relatively brief. So let's get started. Knight takes d4 is the obvious move. If you try to play knight takes e5, you will lose the bishop on b5, so be careful about that. And after the trade, you are supposed to castle. Now, the crux of the Bird's defense is that at some point black has to play c6 and d5. Well, they can't play d6 or d5 because of the diagonal. Playing a6 doesn't really make too much sense because it doesn't fight for the center actively. And if they play a move like knight to f6, we will play e5 immediately and cause a lot of trouble. So it really only makes sense if they follow up with the move pawn to c6. But whether they follow up with c6 immediately or a little bit delayed is the only question. The only other meaningful move apart from the move pawn to c6 is the move bishop to c5. So let us take a look at bishop c5 first. Now, Darius Schwiertz has a very nice book on the Ruy Lopez, which speaks of these variations very nicely. And he recommends the immediate bishop c4, which is a very interesting move. It has a tactical like component to it, which is that if black just carelessly plays a move like c6, well, then the white is immediately winning after something like this g6. You get to take the bishop on c5. Very common tactic actually. This is also seen in a game between Alfred Meek and Paul Morphy. Only black ends up better in that particular game. So in this particular variation, we see that white gets a very stable advantage. Now the game can continue, but white is just cleanly better. Queen b6 is the only move, and after queen d6, the engine evaluation in these positions is consistently about +2. After bishop c4, queen h4 is also suggested by Darius Schwiertz. Doesn't really impress me. We can play the move pawn to d3, and after black continues their development, we can play knight d2. And after something like castles, well, Darius Schwiertz actually really likes dropping the bishop back in a lot of these variations prophylactically. Just sidestepping c6 and d5 or c6 and b5, all of these tempo moves in the center or towards the queen side. And then after something like h6, we can play f4 and continue to put the knight on the f3 square. And these positions are really pleasant. You can just play continue with g4 and g5 in this position, and you will actually get a really pleasant game in a lot of these variations. Knight has to move away so the queen can exit, and we just get to open up the king side with a lot of effect actually. After g4, queen e1, queen g3, g5, something like that is very problematic. And notice how this bishop is really bad actually. And there is really no trouble along this diagonal because there is no way we will allow that pawn to move forward. C3, for example, would be a strategically bad move in these structures. And also notice how the pawn structure that we have created complements this bishop very nicely while also restricting their bishop very well. So we just have much better pieces. The queen is coming into the game. The rook is already active. Very difficult position for black to play. The engine evaluation here, if I had to guess, I haven't checked, but it'd be like +1.5, +2, something around there. So yeah, those are really good. Another thing that black can do if we go back instead of queen h4 is play the move knight f6 right away, but that doesn't work either. There is e5. Of course, the knight can go back, but you should know what to do against d5 in such positions. But this is a little bit of an improved version here because we can first take and then take on g7. And after rook g8, throw in the move queen h5, attacking the bishop. If the bishop goes back, we play queen takes h7 and just make another queen. So that's a really funny way for black to lose that game. Okay, so knight f6 doesn't cut it either. They can play d6. This is what is considered the quote unquote main line because all of these are considered sidelines in the Ruy Lopez anyways. D3. Well, after d3, there are a few variations here. They can play c6 immediately. But before talking about c6, I'd like to talk about knight f6. After knight f6, you get to see this move bishop g5 played, and after bishop g5, the spin is actually really annoying. You will see in another variation as well the spin after queen e7, for example, which was played in the game Maxime Vachier-Lagrave against David Howell in 2009. So I'll just show you that game. After f4, knight f6, just f5 immediately blocking in this bishop. So bishop e6 challenging the strong bishop on c4 is not possible. And once the knight moves away, so there is some possibility and some of avoiding bishop g5. MVL just throws in the move queen h5 here. The game continues knight e5 and just accumulates pieces on the king side. So queen f8 in this position, knight d2, and after king d7 plays this move bishop e6. This is kind of why this game is very famous. That is a very nice move. It should be clear that taking is not possible because now this comes with a check and you're losing the queen on the f8 square. So that is no good. Of course, the king can run away, but okay, black is kind of getting destroyed in this position. So queen a7 and knight f6, bishop g5 being allowed, not a very good idea. So after d3, white is just positionally better after something like c6. Once again, Darius Schwiertz recommends us move bishop to b3. And after knight f6, h3, well, they can try a5, we just respond with a4. h3 just prepares knight d2 and knight f3, preventing bishop g4. So a very nice prophylactic move once again. Castles, we can play bishop g5. The spin is once again very annoying. And if something like bishop e6, we can just go knight d2 and we are just solidly better in this position once again. Probably what you can come up with in this position is that after knight d2 takes, we take with the knight, and then the d4 pawn is quite weak. There is also a lot of immediate pressure. You can go f4 and maybe queen f3, play the move pawn to f5, something like that. But yeah, in general, after in these lines, white just stands clearly better. So bishop c5 we've looked at. Well, let us look at what my opponent played, which is the move pawn to c6. Now this is the most popular move really, and the main line is of course to play bishop c4. Now I played the move bishop e2 because I just wanted to show you guys that you can actually be safe even without knowledge of critical theory. But now is the time where I will actually discuss all the critical theory with bishop c4. Well, not all of it. We can do that in some other video, but I suppose it makes sense to actually just cover the main lines at least. And now the next time I face the bird defense, I will play the critical move with bishop c4. Now d5 is a move that is suggested by me during the game, and a move Darius Schwiertz actually analyzes pretty deeply. But these positions after bishop d7, rook e1, knight e7 are just in general good for white. And here is the move that you have to know to play this line. It is an unintuitive move. It is to play knight a3, just supporting the bishop on b5. If something like g6, you can just go queen f3, attacking the pawn. Notice that the knight is pinned. And if something like this, for example, bishop takes, and queen f6 gives you a very good position. Now the rook has to move, and you can just play the move pawn to d3. There is no hurry in taking here. If bishop g7, queen b6, we develop with either bishop f4 or bishop g5 and have a very pleasant position. So d5 is not really a serious try. That is what you will see very often people playing. But after bishop b5, rook e1, d3, and the queen getting in, it is a very unpleasant position for black. The main line here is knight f6, after which d3 seems to me to be the way to get a reasonable positional advantage in every line. They can play d5. Let us also see what we should do after they play d6. This we already know, of course. We just continue playing knight d2. We kind of have already seen a variation very similar to this. Now they are preparing to castle, but before we play knight f3, it kind of makes a lot of sense to prevent bishop g4 with h3, also creating a little bit of look for the king. Now black castles, we play knight f3. After something like c5, you can play rook e1, and white is clearly better here. We get to play c3, we get to play e5. White controls all the pawn breaks, and therefore the game. Let us go back. They can also play the more aggressive move pawn to d5 in this position, which is a little bit more critical to know. But it being critical doesn't mean it is any worse for white really. We can play e takes d5, and after knight takes d5, throw in the move rook e1 check as usual. Bishop e7, logical moves. If black plays after the move rook to e1, the move bishop e6 in this position, we can throw in queen h5, threatening just rook takes e6, right? This pawn is now pinned to the king. So that is a serious threat. If queen d7 in this position, well, you can very cleanly just take on the d5 square. And this endgame is just very clearly better for white, because we can just play knight d2, for example. And rook c8 attacking the c2 pawn can be met very nicely with knight to b3, because if they take, now we take here and we just win a pawn on the e6 square. Now after king d7, it makes sense to drop the rook back to e2. The engine will say rook e5 is the best move. I like playing rook e2 here. At this stage, we are already out of the bounds of what you would call opening theory. So I'll stop analyzing this here. This is just an endgame in which we are up upon and very comfortable. All right, so let's go back and let's take a look at what else can be played. So we looked at bishop e6 in this position when we give the check. What about bishop e7? I suppose we can play bishop g5 here. And bishop g5 is actually a very positional move. It is a very misunderstood move in these lines. because we are not necessarily trying to win the game out of the opening or anything like that, right? They can't take over here because they are pinned. They can try the move on to f6, but that just gives us a good position after we just drop the bishop back, perhaps to h4 and g3. It is often forgotten how strong this idea is of voluntarily dropping the bishop back here. For example, after this, we can just play bishop g3 of our own volition, right? And the bishop is actually a really strong piece if you think about it. Then we can play f4 and the knight can come into f3. Maybe even f4 is unnecessary. It weakens the e3 square. Just putting the knight on f3 is also a good idea. You don't want a knight to end up like this and target your bishop. That'd be pretty annoying. So f4, not a very good move. So after bishop g5, what if they just castle? Well, we can play bishop takes e7. This move doesn't quite do anything because here they can just play bishop takes g5. And now after bishop here, they can simply play something like g6, rotate the bishop around, or just play something like bishop f5 to continue development, move the queen away, bring the rook to the center. They're doing quite well here. So rather than this bishop takes e7 is what I would suggest here in this position out of these choices. And after something like knight takes here, we can play knight d2. And yeah, after if something like knight g6, Darius Weir's recommends the move queen to h5 plus minus. This is a very good position, of course. It is just that this bishop is much worse as compared to this bishop, and bishop on c4 cannot be challenged with bishop e6 because that just straight up loses a pawn, right? So, for example, something like this, it's actually, well, this actually would lose if you play rook takes e6 to knight f4. So, rather than that, it is a much better idea to play queen g4, attack it a second time, and now there is no way to save it anymore. Even if they play a move like e5, for example, trying to protect it, you can just play rook e4 and double the rooks on the e file, play knight f3 and just win the pawn. There is no way to protect the pawn in these positions. Rook f4 doesn't work either. You might think that it works. No, this just leads to a really bad position. We just kick the knight out and queen e6 check wins the game. So, yeah, this doesn't quite work. I suppose that's enough theory actually for this beginner says. That's already more than I wanted to talk about. I do think I did get carried away. After c6, bishop e to queen e7, well, I mean, rook e1 is of course the best move in the position. I was trying to consider what the best way of doing this is because after rook e1, it is not like they're forced to take on the e4 square. I am convinced after a little bit of thought that rook e1 is not objectively the best move. The objective best way to play this would have been d3. But there is nothing wrong with rook e1. I mean, I can play this and knight f3 here, and that was what was my logic in saying that d3 is much better. It just accelerates the minor piece development, right? The move rook e1 does not do that. And in the opening, you really want to keep developing your minor pieces. And of course, if they blunder with queen takes e4, that's a different thing. But I tell this a lot to my students. You cannot play a move assuming that your opponent will go wrong. Now, so why did I play the move rook e1? I just saw that in general the alignment of the queen and king might prove useful. It is quite difficult to play this position if you think about it. Here we can play d3 or you can even play bishop f1. I think might be really interesting. So is e5 actually, because even here they cannot take because bishop f3 and we just win the queen. And the knight doesn't save them either in this position, which is unfortunate for them. E5, knight d5, yeah. Knight f6 is just unplayable. They have to play g6 or something like that. So I just saw that this would be just in general a good utility move and decided to play it. Much better would have been d3, of course. Well, not much better, slightly better. And after queen e4, I mean, the conversion phase, I won't really bore you guys analyzing this anymore. Bishop g5, yeah, important by the way. After bishop e7, I see this. A lot of beginners just forget that the knight is not pinned anymore to the king, and then they just kind of start to panic, try to move the queen away. It's unnecessary. Your up material just continue developing, move the queen. I notice how I kept the queen centralized while also making sure that there were no immediate threats. Something like this, I mean, I would have just played queen takes f7, and now it is no longer possible to generate threats anymore. Rook e8, I mean, they're just going to continue losing a lot of pawns, and at the end of all of these lines, the queen just returns to the a3 square, from where the queen is still a very strong attacker, right? So Queen d5, d6 played by my opponent. Now I realized that I was thinking of all sorts of moves here, like knight e4. I did play the move queen takes d6. It does appear that knight e4 is actually very strong, because to avoid checkmate they have to now sacrifice the rook, after which we can play queen takes here. And now that the square is there for the king, they don't immediately get checkmated, but this is at this point fully resignable. I just have an extra. What is the material imbalance here? I just have a queen for a piece, is it? Yeah, a queen for a bishop. Well, queen takes d6 was played by me, though. Doesn't really matter at this point. I just made sure the queen was protected and then managed to win the bishop on the d7 square. Okay, so now I see that the video is around 25 minutes long. So what I think I will do is just play another game in this video. And if it becomes really long, it doesn't really matter. I suppose if it's over an hour long, if we have two games. So yeah, and time to play another game. I'll now look for a game online once again. Alright, welcome back to the video, everyone. Now you might notice that the win counter here has been bumped all the way up to 7. So you might ask, well, we ended the last game at 5 wins, so how's it up to 7? Well, the past two opponents that I played have unfortunately either resigned, one of them just resigned out of the opening after just 3 moves for no reason, and the other person just blundered a queen. Since we have already seen a queen blunder in today's video, I didn't want to show that game again. It's kind of boring. So what I'm going to do now is look for another game online, and yeah, we'll try this again. Let's go. Now, hopefully, this doesn't take too long for me to find a game. Okay, it looks like I have the white pieces once again. We are facing an opponent from Turkey, so good luck to my opponent. Let me just enter my opponent's username and the rating here on the overlay, and I'll be right back. All right, so I'm back here. So we have e4, e5 in the opening, standard king's pawn opening here. Let's play knight f3. Knight c6 is what we just faced, and we played, okay, knight to f6. Now knight to f6 is an interesting move. This is the Petroff defense. Now if you want to avoid the main line, then you should always play the move knight to c3 here or something like that. And if you're a 4 knight scotch player, then knight to c3 is the way to go. But this is the main line theory speedrun, of course, so we have to take on the e5 square, right? Queen e7 is an interesting move as well. We can always just come back with the knight here. There is nothing wrong with that. After that, if they take on the e4 square, that is not particularly threatening. We can play bishop e2, and then the developing move knight to c3 comes with tempo. We cannot hold on to this pawn. We can try to play the move pawn to d4 first. Then if they play d6, we can continue with that sequence with the inclusion of the move pawn to d4. Let's actually do that, because my opponent is giving me the opportunity to take the full center, so I don't see why I cannot take the full center. Yeah, so pawn to d4, knight takes e4. Now we have to realize that if the knight just moves away anywhere at all, the knight will be pinned to the king, so there might be a possibility of d6. So you absolutely have to be super careful about that. Now that being said, you can play the move bishop d3 here, attack the knight. If the knight goes back, we can just castle, right? And that is an excellent position for us. Now bishop d3, if they play the move d6, there are some pitfalls that you have to avoid here. For example, the move knight f3 would lose material to knight c3, which is a check, and would blunder the queen, right? So after bishop here, if the knight moves back, you castle. After bishop d3, d6, it is a good idea to take over here. And once they take on the e5 square, you should castle in that position. I think that is a nice way of playing the position. So let's play bishop d3, but always keeping in mind that this is something you have to pay attention to constantly. If they go back, of course, to the f6 square, that is dream position actually. Okay, so my opponent is already not playing a very good opening, I must say, because now I have a big lead in development. I've gotten my king castled, whereas the only real piece they have developed is their knight on f6. And now the pawn is under attack. Sorry, the pawn attacks the knight. So all I'm going to do is just drop the knight back to f3. Now my opponent is the one who has to be careful here. There are some very serious threats in this position, right? They do sidestep it, but now notice that this can sometimes be a threat. Unfortunately, there is the move pawn to c6, taking care of everything. Should we throw in the move rook e1 check? Well, I don't see a downside to it. After rook e1, bishop e7, bishop g5. Well, Maybe I can also think of playing bishop g5 first, actually. And then maybe I should just continue development in this position, to be honest. I don't see a downside to playing rook e1 check, but that just allows them to bring out a minor piece, I suppose. So let's just start with the move knight to c3. Let's start developing and then play probably the move bishop g5 or something like that. G5 seems to me to be the most logical place to develop the dark squared bishop to. They should just play the move bishop e7 in this position and try to get their king out of the center. Um, no, notice that whenever there is this sort of a configuration, you should always keep your eyes open about bishop takes h7 possibilities. So if this knight ever moves away after the king castles, there might be a Greek gift idea. But that is a very situational thing that I'm keeping my eyes open for. But it's not like that is one of the most important details in the position or anything like that. Now, if they play knight c6 in the position, I might throw in the more rookie one check. Bishop e7. There, bishop g5 castles. I complete my development, and there actually I can probably take and play the move knight to d5. Okay, they play bishop e7 right away. I can start with bishop g5 here. I can start with bishop g5. It's a developing move. It's nothing more or less than that, I suppose. Yeah, let's just play the move bishop g5. I also like how the bishops have indirect tension between them, so that if the knight ever moves away, there is going to be this tension. If h6 is played, I am going to drop the bishop back to the h4 square. Keep the indirect tension between the bishops, right? And now it actually makes a lot of sense for me to just calmly play the move rook e1 in this position because, like I said, indirect pressure. Now this knight actually cannot move. It is a very interesting dynamic that the knight cannot move in this position. And like I said, if I can play if I can play a move like knight to d5 in a good version, already I'm thinking about it. Hold on, there is some calculation to be done here because on knight takes d5. Hold on, knight takes d5, bishop takes e7, knight takes e7, bishop takes h7 check. That doesn't quite work, does it? Because at the end of the line, they have queen f5 defending the h7 square. So bishop takes h7, king takes h7, knight g5. King here, queen h5 doesn't work because of queen f5. Okay, we gave it a shot. It doesn't quite work. But then again, now they put the knight on the c6 square. So you should immediately try to look at the move pawn to d5, right? Pawn to d5 is also a very, very interesting move because it attacks the knight. If the knight moves here, we just win a pawn in the position. Where else can the knight go? If the knight goes over here, actually that's pretty annoying. It attacks the bishop in a way that I'm not really thrilled about. Huh. So maybe we can first start with the move pawn to a3 and then set up the move pawn to d5. They're still going to struggle immensely with the development of this bishop. So I do think I have time to play a move like this. Keep in mind that I know that this pawn on the d4 square is actually pretty well defended. So yeah, I think this position is quite nice. If knight d5 here, we should of course not take over here. We should first take the knight on d5. Bishop takes e5, knight takes g5, and we are winning a piece there. So they can't actually play this. If you play bishop takes here, they will take back with this knight or the other knight for that matter, protecting the knight on d5. So just a few observations being made over here. Okay, so bishop takes h6 is obviously not a very good move. Let us just drop the bishop back to the h4 square. If they play g5, that is an incredibly weakening move. Yeah. So after g5, I can even consider d5. If they take on the h4 square, I can take here. Yeah, that's actually a very interesting situation because I have rook takes e7 in that position as well. Okay, they played d5, which honestly is quite a decent move, I think. Now I can play knight e5. They've created a hole in the center of the board on the e5 square, so I can play the move knight e5. Knight takes e5, pawn takes e5. The knight, the knight does not have anywhere good to go. And if the knight goes over here, then I take. Do I have to take though? I can always play bishop g3 and then the bishop is also kind of bad, right? Then there's always e6 they have to watch out for. But then knight e5 here, that is fine for me. Let's do it. Let's play the move knight e5. They gave us the e5 square, I'm jumping into the e5 square. If my opponent decides to take on e5, I will recapture on the e5 square and attack the knight. Um, there are tricks in that position as well. After the knight moves away, uh, bishop takes e7, queen takes e7, knight takes d5, wins a pawn. So taking on the e5 square is certainly not the way to go. But if they play something like queen d6 in this position, then I will pursue the queen with knight to b5. If the queen goes somewhere like this, then I win material with knight g6. Okay, so this is getting what? Okay. Um. Well, you know what? I'm just going to show this game. I don't really want to keep updating the win counter without actually showing the games. I think that is a pretty inconsistent way of doing a series like this. And I'm kind of disappointed about the game. Well, there is this. If they take over here, I first take here, bishop h7, queen d4 wins another pawn. Another. What does it win exactly? Well, I suppose the piece. But I am sacrificing a piece. It exchanges pieces. Let's just put it that way. Yeah. Rook takes e1, queen takes e1, of course. Rook takes e1 comes with a check. Otherwise, I would first throw in knight takes f6. Um, yeah. There is also knight takes e7. That is okay. Now we have to take. This is a threat. This is also attacked. Some move like bishop d8 is depressing to play. Honestly, okay. That just allows this. They're gonna take. The knight has no forward movement as well. And now a very nice move queen e4 attacking the knight and threatening queen at 7. Also attacking b7. So I am playing these moves in the conversion stage of this entire game very, very quickly because I don't really think these deserve too much explanation. Let me know in the comments actually if you guys think that this is important and I should explain all of these things much more thoroughly than I do. Then, well, I don't mind doing that. I just don't want to bore you guys with this convergence stage, so I play the moves rather quickly. But if you want me to explain the thought process behind why I'm playing these moves and go a little bit slower here, not play every move in 2, 3, 4, or 5 seconds, I don't mind doing that. So let me know in the comments. I genuinely do want to improve the content here. Now g4 just makes it so that queen h7 is unstoppable. Yeah, moves like this while talking, I'm immediately taking a look at them. Yeah, that just loses the knight straight up to this and this. King f8 only move. Check here, mate, right? Yeah, check here, give another check. Well, if this, then okay, fine, I suppose. I can take the knight here, I can always go. So, and a very interesting move here is rook to e1, setting up what is called a checkmating net. Then check and queen h8 will be made. Let's play rook e1. I think, did I just blunder the fork? Okay. We shall not talk about this in the comments. We shall instead talk about how I want to convert as efficiently as possible in the comments. Alright, guys? Yeah, we are certainly not going to talk about this in the comments. My opponent won't see knight f3. Of course, they won't see knight f3. How will... Okay, alright. I see how it is. Knight takes h2. Watch them play this and blunder the knight. Okay. Yeah. Let's not worry about it. We are still winning. We are still very easily winning in this position. If I go queen h8, I'm just winning the rook as well. So actually, if they take over here, I think I'll give a check, and win the rook. The knight can escape like this, but in that situation, it will be just a queen versus a bishop, which is just obviously winning. Okay. Time to focus up. Time to focus up, guys. We shall not blunder any more forks in this game. Right? Right. Okay, what's my opponent thinking about? Queen h7, queen h8. The knight doesn't have any escapes hatch other than taking the bishop, so might as well go with the rook. And once they take this guy, see, it all worked out. We got into a completely winning endgame like this, right? Now the knight is trapped, unless it takes the bishop. So yeah, we can pre-move this. That is the only logical move for the knight. Otherwise, I just take the knight. Okay, so my opponent does play the most logical move there. Bishop c6, queen takes a7, queen c5 check eventually. Now, okay, I am going to try to be instructive and not joke around as much about this conversion, because I do want to show you guys some important details of how to convert a position like this where you have an overwhelming amount of material. So what I'm going to do here is just focus on winning one or two pawns on the queen side and just focus all my effort on just queening the a pawn. This is kind of important. So this pawn is what I will take first, because there is an obvious check which paralyzes the entire position for my opponent. And then what I'm going to do is probably, yeah, okay, my opponent just resigned. So what I was going to do is this check is there, but even just queen takes c7 might be very interesting, or queen takes a7 is probably more accurate in this position, because we just can bring the queen over and just try to push this pawn. And you just want to take one pawn like that and continue to push the pawn to win the game. All right, I'll pull up the analysis board and let's see what we've got today here. All right, so let's go back all the way to the beginning of the game. Yeah, so e4, e5. Now the Petroff defense is actually something that is very interesting. I'm not going to once again delve too deep into the theory of it, but you should know that after knight takes e5, one of the best moves in the position is the move d6. This we will discuss in a separate video because that was not what we faced today. We didn't really face a true Petroff defense. I mean, they just played queen e7 in this position, and d4 here just gives me a good position already. I should mention here that some people play the move knight takes e4. Here you should know the opening trap, I suppose, or what is also considered the main line, which is the move queen e2. Right? It is a little bit of how do I put it? It is a little bit of an unconventional move in the opening, not something that is very intuitive. The idea is that if the knight just goes back, then knight c6 in this position wins the queen, because the only way to block the check moving the queen is queen e7, and then you just take it, right? And of course, if any other way is used to block the check, we just take on the d8 square, and here we are just completely winning. So a lot of times what happens here is that the opponent also responds with queen e7, and after queen takes and d6, we cannot really move the knight away because that causes a little bit of problems with the pin on the queen. So d4, d takes c5, d takes c5, knight c6. This is actually a pretty common variation at several levels. I mean, some endgame like this is very often reached. Maybe f6 and then white long castles. This position is actually really good for the player with the white pieces. Of course, if something like this, then very interestingly, you can actually play the move knight to b5, and I love the fork because knight takes c7 immediately gives you an excellent position. King f7, you have bishop c4 check, and everything is just going to fall apart very quickly. If you decide to take somewhere here, we can just recapture, and the knight is actually going to just get out of the a8 square and return, whereas this knight is just lost, right? So we are just going to be up a full piece in this position. So that endgame is actually quite good, and it is very often how these games go. Now, of course, it is not necessary for them to play this move knight to g4. They can play a move like this a6 preventing knight b5. Then it makes a lot of sense to play a move like rook e1, or maybe even just take the knight off the board and play bishop c4, bring the other rook to the center of the board. While it is a bishop and a knight against two bishops here, the activity of your pieces is really what gives you a good advantage. For example, something like this, right? You can play bishop e7 and play rook takes d7. So if king e7, well, you have rook h1, this bishop is still inviolable, and something like bishop g4 can always be met with f3. So Yeah, that is not necessarily a problem. So we are going too deep into the woods in a situation that did not occur in the game. Just know that after d6, the main line I'm going to be choosing is a favorite of Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru Nakamura at the top level, which is to just come back and after knight takes e4, play this move knight to c3. Now this is there are one of two lines here which are considered the main line. The two best moves in the position are either d4 or knight c3, and I really like playing this move knight c3 because it leads to a situation where we have a nice and open center. The Petroff defense is played when the opponent, the player with the black pieces, wants to stay very solid. They don't want to fight in the center, and having an open center position against them is kind of what we want to go for. Now, let us say knight here. You can play bishop e3, you can play queen here, bishop c4, castle long. This is a very comfortable position. Play h4, h5, h6, and I mean, the position just flows for white. Whereas black kind of has to figure out how they want to finish all of their development up. This pawn is kind of in the way of this bishop, whereas this bishop finds it a little bit difficult to develop as well. They have to waste a few more moves. So, for example, something like this, you can already go queen d2, bishop e7, bishop d3. You can see where this is headed, right? If they castle in this position, you castle queenside and just start pushing the pawn. Well, they can try to do the same, but you have a much better developed center of the board. So this is going to favor you. And the open files are also in kind of in your favor, right? This bulwark of pawns on the queen side is also serving as a nice defensive fortress for your king, whereas they do not have that on the king side. So these are positions I really like playing. Let's get back to the game. They played queen e7 here, which is certainly not a very good move. Now you can of course play a move like this, and if something like this happens, just bishop e2, for example, d5. You can also play knight c3 here, but I just suggest castling because if they're careless, well, now they have to move the queen again, like queen b4 or something like that. And you're ready to play a move like d4. You can also play something like c3. I suppose all of these are good moves. So c3, queen d6, and I suppose bishop b5 is kind of nice in this position. Yeah, because that does come with a check, right? So maybe this is not very good for black at all. Of course, so they have to be very careful in this position. If they go for something like d5 and we castle, it is very prudent that they move away with the queen immediately. We can still play d4, of course, but I mean, the rook has not come to the e file, so that is the advantage for them. And now they play bishop e7 and get ready to castle immediately. a3, queen d6. Well, you can play h3 to prevent anything from coming to the g4 square because there is some attacking potential for black as well. On the next move, you can continue playing in the way in which I played during the game. Now let's get back to the game. Of course, here d4, bishop d3. This is the best way to punish this queen e7 variation, which is just unsound in the opening. Because now they have to go back with the knight. So what happens if they play the move pawn to d6, which I was discussing during the game? Well, then you can take, and here you just castle, right? And if they take, they're already in trouble after rook e1. Because what are they going to do about this situation? I'm just going to move my bishop and win the queen, right? If they try to play queen d7, then this wins the queen. If they try to play queen d8, this is straight up checkmate because this is double check and white wins the game. If the best they can do is likely something like knight d7, and after bishop d3, knight e5, f4, lose the knight, and hope and pray that I blunder another exchange like I did in the game. That's not going to happen. Don't worry. That is a one-off thing that you will not see again in the speedrun, hopefully. Knight f6 is the best way of playing the position, and now after d6, here they have to move the queen away. Yeah, they played a good game here. I continued developing bishop e7, bishop g5, castles, rook e1, all top moves of the engine from me. The engine evaluation is about plus 1.6 already, and you should kind of be able to tell, right? I have all of my pieces developed. I have my rook on the open file. I have my king castle. Whereas they don't have a rook on the open file. Their queen is awkwardly placed, blocking the development of a minor piece. This knight is still not developed. And yeah, overall, this is a very good position. Now, after knight c6, the engine recommends that I have to play a position like this. I really don't like the engine's recommendation here. I think the move that I played, which is pawn to a3, is really good. And after h6, here is where I missed a tactic actually, apparently, because I played bishop h4. But there was rook takes e7 right away in this position. Queen takes e7 here. I guess knight d5 is the point, right? If queen e6, for example, you can get into a position like that. Actually, there's a very smart move in this position. So, tactics training, guys. If you well, pause the video here if you want to find the move for yourself, because it is a very interesting move. I think you guys should try to look for it. Well, assuming you pause the video and found the move yourself, it is d5. And that is just a clean fork of the knight and the queen. Like the queen just has to go somewhere and then we just take the knight, right? What happens if the queen just takes over here? Well, notice how the king is just misplaced over here and quite open. Like I said, when the bishop is on d3, we should always keep in mind these bishop takes h7 ideas. So rook takes e7 was winning right away. I did not see that, right? And of course, knight takes e7, let's not even talk about it. This position is horrible to play for black. It doesn't matter that we are down an exchange. The knight is coming in as well. The bishop is already a very good piece. Knight can jump in multiple ways. Queen is coming in. When there are so many scary arrows that you can draw towards the opponent's camp, right? It is not going to end well for the opponent in any case. D5 by my opponent and knight e5 also very good move. And after rook e8, he just lost the queen, right? So what should he have played? I was planning on knight takes e5, just knight takes e5 in this position. Here actually there is a subtlety. Taking on e7, for example, is not very good because they play knight takes e3 now and you're no longer winning the d5 pawn. So what you should do here is actually just take with the bishop. So that after bishop takes, you win the pawn on the d5 square. Alternatively, you can play knight takes d5 right away and then play bishop takes e4. Like the move order doesn't really matter. But you do have to win the pawn on d5. Now you're just up a clean pawn. And yeah, that is your advantage in this position, literally. Alright, of course, you can just move the knight away. If the queens get traded, you get control of both the central files. So that is very good. Rook a8 just blundered the queen. I don't know what my opponent was thinking. If I had to guess, they overthought it and just forgot that the knight was actually attacking the queen. They didn't want to take because they don't want the pawn to come to the e5 square. So what if they just move over here, right? Now that's the thing. Now I can go knight b5 and attack the queen once again. The queen has to go back. And now I can play a move like queen e2 actually because this pawn is also well defended. And if they play a move like a6 here, they just lose to knight takes e6, b takes e6 and queen e7, right? So that is not possible. And if they try to do something like this, well, in this position, I guess knight takes here is also good. But we can just play a simple move like h3 even. And a6 in this position as well, just knight takes, c takes, and just come back with the knight, I suppose. And wonderful position again because the center is completely in shambles for the black side of things. Rook a8, I don't understand. Well, we are obviously not going to talk about how I played the move rook e1 in this position when I literally had mate in 4, by the way. I don't know why I was only thinking of queen h7. I kind of over-relaxed in this position. This is just forced checkmate and 4 moves. Kind of stupid that I didn't play bishop h7 and bishop g6, queen h7, queen f7 in this position. We are not going to talk about rook e1 at all, right, guys? Right, we are not going to trouble me in the comment section. My viewers are very loyal like that. All right, so that will be the end of today's video, guys. This is hopefully, well, after minor edits, I hope it is not too long of a video. If you did like the video, then yeah, do drop a like, then share the video with your friends who will be interested. Subscribe to the channel if you're looking for high quality chess coaching and someone who wants to take chess to the next level seriously. Well, you know where to contact me. There is an email ID on the screen right now. So all right, I'll end the video there, guys. Goodbye everyone. I hope you all have a great day. Bye.